Opening words are from the Reverend Richard S. Gilbert. We meet on holy ground. We meet on holy ground, brought into being as life encounters life, as personal histories merge into the communal story, as we take on the pride and pain of our companions, as separate selves become community. How desperate is our need for one another, our silent beckoning to neighbors, our invitation to share life and death together, our welcome into the lives of those we meet, and their welcome into our own. May our souls capture this treasured time. May our spirits celebrate our meeting, and in this time, in this space, for we meet on holy ground. I invite you to light your chalice at home as we begin our time together. In the light of truth and the warmth of community, we gather to seek, to sustain, and to share. Good morning. I'm the Reverend Pam Romancic. My pronouns are she and theirs, and I serve the Unitarian Church in Hinsdale, Illinois. We gather together this Memorial Day weekend. On Monday, we will honor the sacrifice of all of our veterans, especially those who have died to keep us a place where the idea of freedom might survive. Today, we are also remembering the losses that we have suffered this past year. So many losses during the COVID pandemic. Loss of freedom, loss of connection to family and friends, loss of income and jobs, loss of opportunities to get together just to play and breathe, sometimes loss of people that we dearly loved. It has been a very hard year. But you know, loss is part of every life all the time. We honor our losses and we mourn those who we have loved, but we know that life goes on. Today, we are going to explore how traumatic events in life might actually open our hearts and open ourselves to parts of us that we might not have known if we had just stayed safe and comfortable. It's not about silver linings, but it's about the transformation that can occur when we persist on holding on to our humanity through thick and through thin. But first, a little housekeeping. We've entered into our summer schedule, so many things are going to be changing. Make sure you check the calendar on our website on a regular basis to see what's going on. For example, there is going to be no meditation on Monday, Memorial Day, so the folks will take that day off, but the meditation group will continue on through the summer. Please let Sharita, who is our social media person, know what your group is going to be doing so that we can make sure the calendar is correct. If you're new, our visitor today, and would like to receive our regular communications, please put your information in the chat box or go to our website and hit the contact button and you will be added in. If you'd enjoyed today's service, I hope you might share it with somebody who needs a little bit of hope, inspiration, and just kindness today. You can find all of our services from the past year on the Unitarian Church of Hinsdale's YouTube page. Each month, we share our collection with an institution and group outside the walls of the church. This month, our recipient is Black Lives of Unitarian Universalism. It's a group dedicated to supporting Black identified people of color. If you identify as a person of color and would like to learn more, you can visit blacklivesuu.org or you can contact me and I will share the contact information. After every service, people are invited to stay on for a brief virtual coffee hour after the service. We split into chat rooms where you can meet new people, catch up with old friends, or simply reflect on what you heard in the service that day. A little later in the service, there will be a space for meditation and prayer. If you or someone you know is in need of support, please do call me or email Pam Fodor or myself. You can also put your intention in all caps in the chat box, or just get hold of us any way you can so we can support you. I want to thank today Michaela Scoville-Durante, who is our worship associate doing our readings, and all of our regulars, Jamie Passman, Jean Schaefer, Suzanne Williams, and Paula Sajik-Dorvarak. She runs our coffee hour. This is an amazing team of talented people who are going to be with you and bring you the service each week. Next week, we're going to have a very special service. It'll be a shortened service, and then we will hold our annual meeting, the church's annual meeting for the year, where we'll vote on the budget, and we will vote on the slate of candidates to be on to serve your church next year. So make sure you join us next week on this same channel. After that, we'll be going to summer services, and you will find out all the more information about that on our website. Now, please feel free to sing along as we share our opening hymn, number 5, It Is Something to Have Wept.
It is something to have wept as we have wept, and something to have done as we have done. It is something to have watched when all have slept, and seen the stars which never see the sun. It is something to have smelt the mystic rose, although it break and leave a thorny rod. It is something to have hungered once, as those must hunger who have ate the bread of gods. You have known the things that from the weak are full, a fearful ancient passion strange and high. It is something to be wiser than the world, and something to be older than the sky. To the blessed are our ears, for they have heard. Yea, blessed are our eyes, for they have seen. Let the thunder break on human beast and bird, and lightning, it is something to have been.
Hi everyone. This week is our final step on our faithful journey. We've heard the stories of Unitarian Universalists who've made a difference in the world. Through their stories, we've been reminded to respect and include everyone, find balance, be fair, to respect and honor life and protect the earth. We've remembered to keep learning and ask questions and to make peace. But most importantly, to use that little light inside of us to create some UU magic. I hope your summers are restful and relaxing, but also include some adventures and magical moments. I'm looking forward to seeing you all in the fall. Happy summer. Love you and miss you.
An Apprenticeship with Sorrow by Francis Weller. One of the essential movements that made us human was our ability to hold one another in times of grief and trauma. This skill has, for the most part, been lost under the extreme weight of individualism and privatization. This has had a profound impact on how we process and metabolize our personal encounters with loss and intense emotional experiences. Without the familiar and reliable container of community and family, these times can penetrate our psychic lives in a shattering way, leaving us shaken, frightened, and unsure of our next footstep. This is the experience of trauma. Trauma is any encounter, acute or prolonged, that overwhelms the capacity of the psyche to process the experience. In these times, what confronts us is too intense to hold, integrate, or comprehend. Trauma enacts shifts in identity, often without the guidance, witnessing, and containment of the village. This freefall experience can leave us feeling as though we have little sense of who we are any longer. And now, no matter how hard we try, we can't put the pieces back together again. We cannot go back to how things were before the cancer diagnosis, the accident, the war, the hurricane, the death of our child. Nothing will ever be the same, and too often we are asked to carry it alone in silence. Trauma leaves us thinned and exhausted. Strategies of survival consume much of our life energy. The condition that befalls us following trauma resembles in a powerful way what traditional cultures called soul loss. It led to a flattened world, disenchanted and emptied of vitality, joy, and passion. Relations with the living, singing world were silenced in this condition, leaving one stranded in a deadened world. Soul loss is experienced as a depletion in our vital essence, leading to a decreased sense of potency and power. In mythological imagery, we have entered the wasteland. Here, images appear in dreams of ghettos and prisons, ragged orphans and barren stretches of empty buildings. Psychologically, we call this depression. But to the indigenous soul, depression is the symptom, not the illness. To heal from our traumas, from soul loss, we must restore the conditions which offer something alluring and compelling to coax the soul back home. In other words, what reconstitutes the psyche after trauma, in addition to understanding what happened, is reestablishing our place within the wider cosmological context. We must be restored and restoried to complete the rough initiation that was precipitated by the trauma. In other words, we must return to our lives as vital and engaged participants in the deep song of the world. We are made porous through these profoundly deranging experiences, broken open to allow ourselves to be penetrated by the holiness that pervades all things. Through this communion, we feel our kinship with the singing, breathing world and cosmos. We become immense and connected to the whole. We fall in love with the world and learn to protect what we love. Thus ends the reading.
Say, I love my blackness. Look at somebody, say, I love your blackness. I love your blackness. Do you love my blackness?
Black Lives of Unitarian Universalism is a new movement within our Unitarian Universalist Association.
Our main goals have been to center, uplift, and expand the role of Black people in the Unitarian Universalism faith.
From that, we came to things around caring for each other, healing ourselves and each other, moving from a place of survival into thriving.
Coming together to share hopes, pains, frustrations, and joys about our faith, and moving us to a direction of being more explicitly involved in racial justice work as a faith and as Black folks within this mostly white denomination.
So what we're left with in the wake of the Black empowerment controversy is a faith that claims to affirm the dignity and worth of all people, while at the same time systemically and institutionally denying the agency of Black UUs.
So that it's not always a friendly and welcoming place for Black folks, which is even more reason why it's important that we are beginning to create these explicitly Black spaces for Black Unitarian Universalists to get the kind of support that most white Unitarian Universalists take for granted, the sense of belonging, the sense that they/we have actually arrived at home.
People have come up to me in tears saying that they've been a UU for a long time and felt really lonely as a Black UU, and yet they've stayed in it because their faith is so important to them. Having the explicitly Black spaces has been transformative, though, in helping them feel connected to a Black UU community and not feel so isolated and alone.
It is our duty to fight for our freedom.
It is our duty to win.
It is our duty to win.
We must love and support each other.
We must love and support each other.
We have nothing to lose but our chains.
We have nothing to lose but our chains.
Hi, I'm Bob Daniel Wayman, serving on the board of the Unitarian Church of Hinsdale. This is the time in our service when we remember the good things this church does in the world and invites you to help support our work. You can go to our website, www.hinsdaleunitarian.org, and click on the donate button, or you can simply send your check to the church office. Now, even though we can't be together right now, I invite you to say our offering words together. This church is made up of all of us. It is what we learn together, the work we do together, the fun we have together. It is what we share with one another, with the people around us, and with all the world.
Hi, I'm Mike the Monarch. Butterflies like me need lots of natural habitat to make our homes and find healthy meals. Your Green Sanctuary Committee is helping out by providing everyone at church with a beautiful butterfly milkweed plant. This beautiful orange flower is one of my favorites and will brighten your yard and give monarchs a good home. You can pick up yours today, Sunday, May 30th at church, between noon and 2 o'clock. At church this Wednesday from 2 to 5 p.m., at church this Thursday from 4 to 8 p.m., or at the home of our own butterfly lady, Pat Miller, on Friday from 2 to 5 p.m. Pat's address and phone number will be in the chat during the service. You have lots of opportunities, so it's easy to pick up your plant and be a hero to some good-looking insect. Come on, give a butterfly a hand.
In Blackwater Woods by Mary Oliver. Look, the trees are turning their own bodies into pillars of light, are giving off the rich fragrance of cinnamon and fulfillment. The long tapers of cattails are bursting and floating away over the blue shoulders of the ponds. And every pond, no matter what its name is nameless now. Every year, everything I have ever learned in my lifetime leads back to this. The fires and the black river of loss whose other side is salvation, whose meaning none of us will ever know. To live in this world, you must be able to do three things: to love what is mortal, to hold it against your bones, knowing that your own life depends on it, and when the time comes to let it go, to let it go. Thus ends the reading.
I invite you into space of meditation and prayer. I invite you to breathe in and then breathe out. Today is a day to remember, to acknowledge the pain that is part of every human life in one time or another. We especially remember the pain of this past year. Access any pain that you might be carrying in your body, either whether it's physical or psychological or emotional or even spiritual. Breathe into that pain. Breathe in. See what color it is. Breathe out. See where it lives within your body. Breathe in. What might it want to teach you about who you are, what your situation could be, about what you need? Breathe in, breathe out. Breathe in grace. Breathe out pain. Breathe in community. Breathe out isolation. Breathe in love and breathe out love. We connect with one another in our deepest selves when we open to all the pain that has been in our lives. When we remember that love holds us through every bit of it. that love is the container for all of the loss that we know. As the poet reminds us, to live in this world, we must be able to do 3 things. To love what is mortal with our whole being, to hold it against your bones, knowing your own life depends upon it, and then, when the time comes to let it go, to let it go. Today, hold what must be held, release what should be released, walk in peace.
An excerpt from The Velveteen Rabbit by Marjorie Williams. "What is real?" asked the rabbit one day when they were lying side by side near the nursery fender before Nana came to tidy up the room. "Does it mean having things that buzz inside you and a stick-out handle?" "Real isn't how you are made," said the skin horse. "It's a thing that happens to you. When a child loves you for a long time, not just to play with, but really loves you, then you become real." "Does it hurt?" asked the rabbit. "Sometimes," said the skin horse, for he was always truthful. "When you are real, you don't mind being hurt." "Does it happen all at once, like being wound up?" he asked, "or bit by bit?" "It doesn't happen all at once," said the skin horse. "You become. It takes a long time. That's why it doesn't happen often to people who break easily, or who have sharp edges, or who have to be carefully kept. Generally, by the time you are real, most of your hair has been loved off, and your eyes drop out, and you get loose in the joints and very shabby. But these things don't matter after all, because once you are real, you can't be ugly, except to people who don't understand. Thus ends the reading.
Life is hard. It's not a bumper sticker or the glass half empty kind of hard. It's a reality in which we live and breathe as human beings on this planet. And you know what? The year 2020, 2021 has been incredibly hard. It's been full of pandemic restrictions, of not really knowing what's going to happen in the world around us. A year where we collectively listened to the experts and read everything we could and tried to make the best decisions that we could in any given moment, and still had no control over what was going on around us. No assurances of when or if it was going to be over. It has been a traumatic year for just about everyone. A long time ago, I learned that there are three main components of suffering. The very first component is pain. It's just the average thing, the bumping our shin, doing things. It's just the everyday pain that we feel. But suffering comes into play when there's a lack of control over when and how that pain happens, and when there's a lack of predictability about when it's going to happen next or what might come next. Because humans can bear a lot of pain, but it's the suffering that really gets to us and wears us down. Those three things together, pain, lack of control, and lack of predictability, kind of have a big impact on our human psyches. They wear us down and they break us out of our normal experience of life into something that we call suffering. This is why doctors have learned to give patients control over dosing their own narcotics when they're in severe pain. Because people will give themselves much less morphine when they have control of that button, because they know they have control over something. And it's the pain isn't the bad part, it's the fear of something they can't predict. The pandemic year has been a period of no control whatsoever. And for people who have a hard time with ambiguity, it's pushed some pretty serious buttons. It explains why a portion of the population refuses to wear masks. It may be the one area of their lives that they could take control. They could feel like they had some agency in their lives during the middle of all of this not knowing. They preferred to risk infecting themselves and the people around them over feeling helpless. Now, the pandemic has brought suffering and loss and pain, along with uncertainty and lack of control. So it is the trifecta for human psyches. It's been an interesting thing from my own personal life after I've come out of a very challenging 5 years personally. Starting back in 2016, my dad died after a long time suffering from ALS. And then a short 5 weeks after he died, my mom, who had been vibrant and alive and still working, suffered a massive stroke. And she ended up being in care until she died in the spring of 2017. And while that was going on, my wife's father fell and broke his hip in the spring of 2017, negotiating one of those huge falling house of cards where they had to be immediately moved into assisted care because her mother had been suffering from dementia for many years. To make it even worse, my wife was diagnosed with cancer, I think just a week before her mom died in 2018. And then she had a second bout of cancer and was actually in the hospital from consequences when her dad died in 2019. So it has been an exhausting 4 years, and we were so looking forward to 2020 as a time when we might recover and get some of our lives back, get our feet back underneath us. Yeah, they say if you want to make God laugh, make a plan. So all of our plans for recovery were out the window. We delayed plans to return for her parents' interment ceremony into New York, and I haven't seen any of my extended family or even my son for almost 2 years now. Over this time, we have followed the science. We have masked, we have stayed in our house, and we have isolated. Despite all of that, I have to say that we have had it pretty good. I know of so many people who have it so much worse during this past pandemic year. One woman couldn't see her mother in a care facility for the entire year. Her mother had dementia, and they would not let her go in to see her. My friend lived with fear of what was going to happen, lack of control, lack of predictability, fear that she was going to lose her mom without ever seeing her again. And some of her fears did come true. Her mom did sicken with the disease and did die, but luckily she was able to go in and spend the last day with her, spend the last hours with her mom saying goodbye, which was a blessing because so many people have not even had that. So many people have had to say goodbye to somebody they loved without being able to hold a hand or stroke a forehead or give that last hug. In my family, in your family, in families all across the country, there's been so much loss and so much pain, so much inability to predict, so much uncertainty. Francis Weller wrote, "This is the experience of trauma. Trauma is any encounter, acute or prolonged, that overwhelms the capacity of the psyche to process the experience. In these times, what confronts us is too intense to hold, integrate, or comprehend," end quote. I think those words describe this past year and a half. No control, little to no certainty of if or when it might end, loss of friends and family, loss of time with people we love. There have been no parallels, even in our recent memory, from which we can draw upon to gain perspective or to see how did they do it before so that we can do it again and get through it. We are making it all up as we go along. As a society, we have collectively experienced a major trauma, and it's going to take a long while for the consequences of what's going on right now to even become apparent.
The Uses of Sorrow by Mary Oliver. In my sleep, I dreamed this poem. Someone I loved once gave me a box full of darkness. It took me years to understand that this, too, was a gift. Thus ends the reading.
We are in the process now of emerging from over a year of being lost in a foreign landscape. We've been living in a box full of darkness where we couldn't see our hand in front of our face. Not only could we not find solid ground, at times we weren't even sure it was there. That darkness was scary and unsettling. It turned many ideas and assumptions that we'd had on our head. Up became down, in became out. Our urge to gather together to offer comfort was the worst thing we could do. Simple gestures of connection like hugs were not allowed. It's tempting. As we stumble onto a new shoreline now, as we stumble out of the pandemic, to just try to put it all behind us, to whoop and holler and laugh and hug and celebrate the return of the light. I mean, we have to celebrate. Our lost lives are being found. Our lost connections are being restored, and that is right and good. But I'm going to respectfully suggest that we should maybe be prepared for some unexpected consequences. We should allow ourselves to be open to feelings and perceptions which may not quite make sense. Weller says that trauma takes us out of our familiar reality and changes our relationship with the world around us. And that the bigger and more stressful the event, the bigger our bodies respond to that trauma. In really overwhelming trauma, the end result can be something which feels like loss of soul, loss of meaning and purpose. Weller calls it soul loss. When we are experiencing soul loss, we get stuck in what feels like a barren landscape, and we cannot find our way back to our old reality. I'm sharing this because that was my experience after those 5 years of loss and almost losing my wife. There was so much overlapping loss within that time. There was the sale of my childhood home, which closed on the exact same day that a final contract was made on Karen's childhood home. All my bearings were shifted, and I felt completely lost and at sea. It was puzzling and disorienting because on the surface, most things looked the same. The world was still a beautiful place that I'd always known it to be. I could see it in my mind. I could recognize it with my intellect, but I couldn't feel it anymore. It was as if something inside me had died, and I couldn't really find anything that was pulling me forward, that was giving me life. And I tried all kinds of things which had worked in past times of depression. I journaled. I tried writing poetry. I saw my therapist. I engaged a ministry coach. I read inspiring authors like Francis Weller. If I followed any bit of life that stirred within me, looking for that bridge back to my old self again. But the problem was, I could not go back to that old self. My parents were gone. That safe center for family life in Ohio had been sold. There was nothing to go back to. The assumption that my wife was healthy and was going to be with me for a long time, that assumption had been shaken badly. It was not going to come right back. I couldn't go back. So what I did was just pay attention. I listened to my body and to my heart. And while nothing seemed particularly engaging, I did feel this tiny call to green. Didn't know what it meant, and Karen and I spent long hours discussing what it could be, because it wasn't an idea, it was a feeling. It was a longing for trees, for grass, for meadows, for birdsong. It was a yearning to get away from traffic and congestion, to find a space to breathe. So, last spring, as the pandemic closed everything down, Karen and I started looking for a new house out in the country. We came up with a general plan, but mostly just looked at anything and everything that came up on the real estate listings that might call to us. Eventually, we found a home outside of Woodstock, Illinois. We went in to see it only because it had a cool stove. The outside had been unimpressive and not what we thought we wanted. You know, once we walked into the house, something woke up in me. I finally began to feel a sense of possibility, an inkling of a way forward again. Now, the house was a mess. The previous owner had died over a year previously without any heirs, so it was full of everything you can possibly imagine. In fact, it took us 6 large dumpsters full to clean all of the stuff, all of the leftover accumulated detritus of a 8-decade life, and be able to make space for us. And even with all the stuff we threw away, there was still a whole bunch of good furniture and good stuff that we integrated into our own life. There was a lot there. So we worked and we worked, and we reclaimed a house that had been unintentionally neglected as its owner grew older and less healthy. And this spring, oh my gosh, this spring we've really gotten going. We put in 6 raised garden beds. We planted an herb garden. We planted numerous native trees and bushes. And just yesterday, planted 9 fruit trees for a little fledgling orchard. We joined the local land conservancy group, and we've become co-owners in a brand new co-op that's being formed. In short, we've reinvented ourselves. And I'm finally beginning to feel the beauty that has been here all along. I'm finally able to experience the joy of connection to earth and sky, which had gone away for such a long time. I'm both the same person and a new one, emerging from the dark night of the soul. As all of us come out of this pandemic trauma, this 1.5 years that we've lived through, I'm guessing that a lot of people are going to be needing to find new ways of being alive and finding their ways back into life again. As we've heard so many times, we're not returning to normal. We're returning to a new normal, one that we might not even recognize. You can see it in the wild housing market with so many people out there looking for houses, looking to make a brand new start. I know 3 people personally who have sold their homes, who have cleared out years of accumulated treasure that no longer fit who they were, and who are making space for a new post-COVID reality. Now, I'm not telling you all to go out and get new houses or even move, but I'm saying that something big has happened to us, and we have to make space for our bodies and our minds and our psyches to adjust to the immensity of this change we have experienced. It was large, it was life-changing, it was disorienting. It's been challenging, but there's an opportunity to use this experience to grow into fuller and richer versions of ourselves, to break out of situations and habits which no longer serve. If we approach consciously, we can open to widening, to exploring, to learning new things about who we want to be in the world. Now, we could just brush past it, focusing only on getting back to some normal, getting back to the old you. But the danger there is that trauma and pain that you have experienced will continue to live on in your body, continue to wear on you, maybe even take the joy out of life, and to pop up unexpectedly with some painful trigger when you're not expecting it. So my advice is allow yourself to really be present to all of the sadness and loss you have experienced during this pandemic time. Don't look at the silver linings. They're there. Don't look at the serendipitous moments, but pay attention to your sadness. It is out of true grief that we can transform ourselves into richer, wiser, and happier human beings. Just like in the Velveteen Rabbin, we are bumped and banged up. We are tossed all over the place on that journey to becoming fully ourselves. Like the skin horse said, it takes a long time. You become. And generally, by the time you are real, most of your hair has been loved off and your eyes drop out and you get loose in the joints and very shabby. But the things don't matter at all, because once you are real, you can't be ugly. You can only be you, end quote. We are on a journey now to become our fullest and most true, real selves. We have experienced a collective journey together into the darkness that is unprecedented in recent history or memory. Don't be afraid. This is an opportunity. Pay attention to your own experience. Pay attention to your own journey. Listen to where your heart is calling you, whether that's a big move, whether that's simply a change in how you show up, how you relate to the people around you, how you listen to your own heart's call. The cure for soul loss is soul repair. It's allowing space and time to construct a new, more nourishing, more connected life in which we can live and breathe and have our being as human beings together. As the pandemic continues to recede into memory, give yourself the gift of time and patience and compassion. Give yourself the ability to ponder, dream, and imagine. Give yourself time to heal. Lost hearts can always be found when they are born again in love. Amen, and blessed be.
The Grandeur of the Soul by Francis Weller. When we look up into the bowl of night and take in the exquisite beauty of the stars, we are catching a glimpse of the eternal and a mirror of our own immense lives. We have been gifted with this stunning life, and along with this comes an innate responsibility to live it fully. And since the soul is at home with all of the manifestations of this world, from joy to sorrow, despair to astonishment, and everything in between, let us risk seeing ourselves as part of the grandeur of the soul. Exercise. Take some time one of these nights and lie out under the canopy of stars. Let your imagination go and let it invite you into a reverie that suggests that what you are seeing is also a reflection of your own vastness. What if that is true? What if you, as Whitman suggests, are large and contain multitudes? How might you walk differently in the world? How would your story of yourself change to account for the larger and wider sense of identity?
We've extinguished our flame, but not the light of its truth, the warmth of our community, nor the fire of our commitment. These we carry in our hearts and share with all the world. Our benediction is by the Reverend Kendall Gibbons. There is, finally, only one thing that is required of us: to take life whole, the sunlight and shadows together, to live the life that is given us with courage and humor and truth. We have such a little moment out of the vastness of time for all the wondering and loving. Therefore, let there be no half-heartedness. Rather, let the soul be ardent in its pain and in its yearning and in its praise. Then shall peace enfold all of our days, and glory shall not fade from our lives. Go forth. Amen, and blessed be.